Going through some things. As you guys, I don't know if you already know or if I've told you, pretty much my sermon topics, I've been kind of going through Ruckman's theological seminar of the air. And I'm not Ruckman, so I can't preach like him, I can't be him, I can't hit everything he hits. So I more just kind of use them as topics and see what I can do, and I try to get you guys some Bible preaching and some doctrine in there. And how I've heard it put is teaching will fill your head like a balloon, and preaching will pop it. So I try to give you both. Keep our eyes to heaven and our feet still on the ground. Amen. So what we're going to look at today is called Why Does God Allow Suffering? Why does God allow suffering? And so there's some things that are really hard to be understood. You look at humanity, you look at things that people have to go through, maybe even some things you've had to go through. And it's tough. So you start to look at life, and it gives you questions. It really gives you questions. Why do people have to go through what they go through? And I'm not going to act as if I have the answer for all of it, but I know one book that does. It has all the answers right here. Now, sometimes the truth is hard to swallow, but this book is truth. We know that. So I believe that you must first, if we're going to come to this topic, why does God allow suffering? I think you have to make a delineation that there are two types of people in this world. There are saved and there are lost. Now, whatever color you are, wherever you were born and raised, you fall into one of those two things. You are either saved and going to heaven, or you're lost and going to hell. So we got to make that delineation first. So when we're looking at, or actually open up to Hebrews 12. Hebrews 12, verse 8. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 8. And it says this. It says, "But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers," there's one of those alls, "then are ye bastards and not sons." So some things that people go through, you just simply can't blame on God. So God does not deal with everybody as His children. That would be like you straightening out your neighbor's son in your neighbor's living room. Wouldn't that be weird? That's very weird. So if the individual is not born again, not a child of God, not saved, there will be no chastisement from God. You get me? So we got to make that distinction, and then I believe we can start to get some answers to our questions. Okay, so I guess on this aspect we're going to be looking more, because that's what I'm preaching to, more saved, more from the saved aspect than the unsaved. Okay, so I'm going to give you 4 things. The first thing we're going to look at is some people suffer to save others. Open up your Bible to Hebrews chapter 11. Now, who cannot but think of Job going through all the trials that he did, and going through all the hardships that he did, and then being restored, the Bible says, twice as much that he had initially was restored to him. Who cannot think of the hardships that Paul went through with the beatings, being chased out of synagogues, and caned, and all these things he went through, but yet Paul still lived for God. Now, who cannot think of maybe the saints of old and all that they went through, all the hardships they went through, being forced to recant, and still they held their faith, and still they went through it, and now we know they're in glory. But who cannot help but think of all that? We're in Hebrews 11. Look at verse 32, and I'll go to the end of the chapter. It says, "And what shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, and of Barak, and Samson, of Jephthah, of David also, and Samuel, and of the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouth of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings, yea, moreover, of bonds and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn asunder, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and in mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. And these all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise, God having provided some better thing for us, that they without should not be made perfect. So we think about some people have to suffer, I guess, for the benefit of others, or to save other individuals. If you look in John chapter 11 and verse 4, we see Lazarus. John chapter 11. John chapter 11 and verse 4. And you wonder sometimes what you're going through and what significance does it have. Well, maybe you're something like Lazarus. Look at John chapter 11 and verse 4. It says, when Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. Now think about how Lazarus must have felt. He was sick unto death. This sickness killed Lazarus. And yet we see that God had a purpose in it. Jesus had a purpose. And it was for the glory of God in Lazarus' sickness. So sickness and suffering brings people together that would normally never be around. Now, my mother-in-law, Mary Chris's mom, there was a point in time where we were estranged from her brother since we got married. And we had never even talked to him. He didn't go to the wedding. And you know what brought us together back with him? It was a sickness that their mom got. So it was the first time we'd seen him in years, and it was in a hospital room looking at mom. He was sick on the bed. And you think about sickness, maybe going into a hospital, meeting an unsaved doctor. I'm sure you've heard stories of unsaved doctors treating Christians that are praying, and these unsaved atheist doctors, don't understand how, little Miss Susan on that bed going through all this hardship is still smiling, still praying, still giving glory to God, and still witnessing to Him. Well, that could be for the glory of God then, that sickness. So another thing about that is meeting people in the hospital that need to be saved. Me and Mary Chris, we went to go visit people in the hospital and ended up handing out tracts and witnessing to a person in the waiting room, which it's like, it gets you wondering, maybe this whole thing was to get us in here, to get that tract in that person's hand. But think about this, sickness might bring people together for a witnessing opportunity that would have never happened without a sickness, without a tragedy, without a hardship. I know for a fact that if my dad never went through the divorce that my parents went through, he probably would have never got saved. Through that hardship, through that trial, through that suffering, through hitting rock bottom, there's no other way to look but up. Amen. When you're on your back, right? So God, looking from the future, He sees much more of what matters than we can imagine. You think of the people there in Hebrews 11. You think about, it says, they quench the violence of fire. Well, was that fun? Violence of fire, they quenched it. You think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Was that fun? Was that comfortable? Was that pleasing to their flesh? No. They escaped the edge of the sword. Out of weakness were made strong. Weakness. Is that fun being weak? You ever been so sick your body's weak? How do you like that? You know, like Brother Yancey, the guy only got 3 hours of sleep last night. He said, man, I can't do it. I'm so sorry. I mean, what a blessing that guy still comes to drop his offering off. I mean, I don't know. He knows. I mean, he was telling me when I just get up to walk to the fridge, this is after his heart attack, and go back to the couch, I feel like I worked the whole day. And it's like, wow. You know, I wonder what the purpose is in that. I wonder why he's not bitter and cursing God like a lot of people get. You know, maybe he's trying to see past it. These people that wax valiant in fight. You like being in a fight? How is it being in a fight? I mean, you have an enemy. You know, a lot of people, they just can't deal with having someone that doesn't like them. How you like being in a full-blown fight? Not just gossip in the office. This is someone waiting at your car when you're trying to go home in the parking lot. They want to fight. You know, you just think about these hardships that they went through, and yet, I think in a lot of ways it was for you. So you can read Daniel in the lion's den. So you can read David facing Goliath. So you can look at these stories of old, which are true stories, amen? And you can look at those and say, you know what? If God can get Gideon through that, surely he can get me through this. You see? But you think Gideon was thinking about you? No. Gideon probably didn't have half the idea of what's going on. Like, okay, Lord, I guess I got to go get into a fight. You want to be with me, please? Please, please? You see my life? You know? And sure, God did it, but for what? For you. You think about Gail Riplinger, she was struck with an illness, you know, in order to make her book, the New Age Bible versions. She said that was the only way she was able to do all that work, is God blessed her with an illness. So why does God allow suffering? Well, maybe to save others. Maybe to save others. Look at John chapter 9. John chapter 9 and verse 1. John chapter 9 and verse 1. And it says, and as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. How do you think the blind man felt about that? You know, growing up as a young kid, I mean, I could just imagine how Josiah is going to feel when he sees kids riding bikes and playing tetherball, and he's like, Dad, I want to go out there and do that. Well, what if? Oh, Josiah, you're blind. You can't ride a bike. You know, oh, you can't play tetherball. You're going to get hurt. You know, think about this man was born blind. How do you think he felt about that? You know, you think he got bitter and cursed God like a lot of people do? You know what? He didn't. This guy came to Jesus, and he found out that his blindness was that the works of God should be made manifest in him. God had a purpose in him. So think about the disciples aspect. They were convinced that somebody being blind from birth must have been from someone's sin. Someone done sin. Someone did wrong. They were convinced. Because they didn't say, hey, Jesus, what's the reason of this? They said, Jesus, was it the parent's sin or his sin? Because there's only two options, Jesus. Someone sinned. And Jesus is like, oh, neither of them. They did it because I have a plan. You know, he's born blind because I have a plan. The hardships you're going through today and the tragedies you're going through today, have you ever considered maybe God has a plan? It might be. It might be that he's trying to use you to go through suffering. Why? So others can be saved. Now, be careful when you're dealing with people not to just default and look for some wickedness that caused a tragedy. Be careful with that. Because it's not always a sin that's brought something in. It might be God's hand. You know, you think about Job's miserable comforters. How did they get that name? Because the whole time they're saying, Job, you sin. Job, you sin. Job, you sin. And Job's like, I didn't sin. Honestly, I'm serving the Lord. You know, I'm giving God glory. He ended up having a pride problem down the road, but even God said he didn't sin. Now, look at Job 1:1. Job chapter 1 and verse 1. It says, there was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. And let me see. There's another place where he's telling the devil. Here it is, verse 8. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. See that? That's from the very mouth of God. So why did Job have to go through everything he went through? You see? Was it sin? Was it his sin? Was it his personal, secret, pet sin? Not at all. Look at Isaiah 55. Isaiah chapter 55. Because surely it was either the parents' fault or the kids' fault, right? Isaiah 55. And let's look at verse 8 and 9. And it says this. For my thoughts, God talking, are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. See, maybe God is doing something you don't understand. You ever consider that? Maybe there's tragedies in your life, so 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, or maybe even 5 days down the road, you're going to have an opportunity to minister to somebody who is now going through the same thing you're done going through. I sat in a living room with a couple, me and Mary Chris sat with them, that just lost, this wasn't recently, this is a few years ago, that just lost their child by drowning in the pool. The little guy drowned in the pool. And the mom tried to revive him, he couldn't revive him, or she couldn't revive him. And you know what? I tried to give him a Bible. I tried to pray for him. You know what? But then another parent came in that lost a child. And you know what? I could tell. You know what I could tell? That guy had much more of an effect than me, even with an open Bible. Why? Because he went through it. You see what I'm saying? Now, that's not saying, oh, the Bible doesn't work. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that God knows that. God knows this is how people work. And if you think you're going to have any type of effect in this world for the Lord, you're going to have to go through something. So you can minister effectively to other people. And it's not all going to be pleasant. Some of it's going to be hard. Some will bring you to your wit's end. Some will bring you to the end of your rope. Amen? And maybe the younger people don't have much understanding about it, but you will. You will. You know, you just kind of compare it to when you need to get ministered to. Who are you going to look to? Probably somebody that's went through something similar. You know, when you go through your little phone list, well, who am I going to call? Or you look around at the people at church, who do I think would understand this situation the best? Probably somebody that's went through it, right? So how many people do you think have gotten encouragement in reading and hearing Job's story? Do you think you could even measure it? I mean, do you think Job was thinking about all these people that would one day open up to the book of Job and be like, oh, you know what I'm going to learn is why do the righteous suffer? Why do the righteous suffer? You know, all through the book of Job. You think he's thinking about that? And not his kids? Not his wife that's saying, curse God and die? How do you think that felt? That was hard to go through. But, you know, Job's hardships were for the generations of believers afterward to show why the righteous suffer. You have somewhere to run now in the Word of God. When you're going through tough things, Job knows. Job knows what you're going through. You know, you think about what else could we point to about someone suffering for the benefit of others? Oh, of course, Jesus Christ. Someone suffering for the benefit of others? You think it was pleasant when he's sitting in the Garden of Gethsemane sweating blood because the pressure was so intense? I mean, you know, somebody walking into the electric chair, they've never been to the electric chair. Somebody walking to the gallows, they've never had the floor drop and done the gallows before. So there's kind of a, I don't really know what I'm going to experience when they slam the electricity on or when the floor drops. But Jesus Christ, being God, knew every ounce of pain he was going to feel as he approached that cross. I mean, as they're ripping his beard, he knew who was going to take that part of the beard out. He knew who was going to smack him in the face and say, prophesy, right? He knew who was going to say, crucify him, crucify him. He knew every aspect of that. He knew how many thorns would be in that crown that would enter into his skin. He knew how many stripes he would get. He knew how many nails that he would get and how it would feel. He knew that. You see what I'm saying? He went through all that suffering for you. So you benefit from his suffering. Jesus Christ. He endured, the Bible says, such contradiction of sinners with a mock trial. He provided you a way of escape, so you could escape the damnation of hell by believing on his name. What a blessing. What a blessing. So that's the first thing you look at. Why does God allow people to suffer? Well, some people suffer to save others. Some people suffer to save others. See, your health is not as important as someone's soul. You get that? See, you can have bad health here your whole life, but guess what? You die and you're going to heaven. So now that you're saved, really, aren't you just supposed to be his workmanship? I mean, you're just supposed to be a tool in God's hand, right? Just use meat for the master's use, right? Well, what if he needs to make you sick so he can use you? You know, there's tools in the toolbox we use at work, and you know, we have some of the funniest looking tools, but they have a purpose. You know, one of them is a flathead screwdriver. You know, and well, what's up with this flathead screwdriver? You know what? The tool's probably older than me, but it's been in the toolbox the whole time. And you know, this flathead screwdriver, it's like somebody like took it and just bent the end of it. And it's like, for what? Probably for that one job and that one screw that they couldn't get. And you see what I'm saying? It's like, you know, I didn't have anything else in my truck, so guess what? I had to go look in my toolbox, and that's the tool that I'm going to use. You know, and it's named Randy Gorski. You know, and I have to use this tool, and you know, I got to tweak this tool so I can use it. And sure enough, you know, the pliers get put on your forehead, and then the bending starts. You're like, oh, it hurts. Well, God said, you're my tool. I need to use you for something. Can I use you? You see? So what's another reason some people suffer? Well, some people suffer because of their own sins. Some people suffer because of their own sins. So, oftentimes you'll talk to people, dealing with them at the track table or door knocking or whatever, at work, and you know what? They're going to say, you know, this huge trial, this tribulation I've been through, it's God's fault. And you know, ever since I went through this, you know, I haven't prayed, maybe. And they put it all on the responsibility of the Lord. I've spoken with many people who have bitterness in their heart against the Lord because something they went through. Maybe it was a divorce. And they said, you know what? I prayed. I asked God to keep my marriage, and He didn't do it, and I'm never going to pray again. You know, and they put it on the Lord. But let me ask you this. Can God be blamed for lung cancer for a person that smoked for 30 years? See what I'm saying? Can God be blamed for liver damage or cirrhosis of the liver when somebody's drank like a fish their whole life? Oh, I should have never got this. What makes you think God had anything to do with that? Well, when I smoked and drank for 29 years, I didn't have anything, but the 30th year, you see? Or, like I said, maybe it's, what about a broken home and marriage? Well, can God be blamed for that when you chose to spend every waking hour at work plus overtime neglecting your wife and home? Is that really God's fault? You see what I'm saying? You made decisions. You know, does Galatians 6:7 have any truth to it? Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. Does that mean anything? Well, no, it's God's fault, and I'm never praying again. You see? Look at John chapter 5. John chapter 5. In John chapter 5, we meet a paralytic man at the pool of Bethesda. Look at John chapter 5 and verse 14. Now, you all know the story. There was, I believe it and I preach it, there's a wicked angel that's stirring a pool. And everybody, even though Jesus is in town, they all got their eyes on this wicked angel that's stirring this pool because they all want to get their healing. When Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life, He could have given them the healing. But in John 5:14, a man, you know, pretty much, it says, Jesus heals this man, and he stands up and he gets out of there. And then we're in verse 14. It says, afterward Jesus findeth him in the temple, and said unto him, behold, thou art made whole, sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee. So Jesus tells you something about how he got there. That man got there because of his own sin. You see? Jesus said it. He said, you know what? From now on, you better watch the way you walk, son. Because, you know what? You've been given your get-out-of-jail-free card here. You know, there's no telling. You might never get one again. You know, I've talked to many Christians, and I think at some aspect in my life, I kind of felt the same, where I felt like if I didn't get right with God, that God was going to kill me. And I've talked to some people, and they have, I mean, not like God appeared in a burning bush or something, but they felt a pretty strong impression at some point in their life that God said the same thing to them. This is going to be your last time, son. And if you don't get right, I'm going to kill you. And I believe you can prove that in the Bible as far as it can come to that with a believer. I believe you can prove that. But what am I showing you is that some people suffer because of their own sins. Now, look at Matthew chapter 9. Let's look at another example. Matthew chapter 9. You know, you think about your decisions. You think about your hardships. Maybe these are a couple things we can look at. God, is this hardship for your glory? Is that why? Or God, was it just my stupidity that got me here? We're in Matthew chapter 9, and look at verse 2, and it says, And behold, they brought to him a man sick of the palsy, lying on a bed. And Jesus, seeing their faith, said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, be of good cheer. What's he say? Thy sins be forgiven thee. And behold, certain of the scribes said within themselves, This man blasphemeth. And Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, Wherefore think ye evil in your hearts? For whether is easier to say, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Arise and walk? But listen to this. But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins, which he already showed you the man was guilty of. Remember? Thy sins be forgiven thee. He says, but that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins, then saith he that is sick of the palsy, arise, take up thy bed, and go unto thine house. So it was clear that this man's sins got him paralyzed. And Jesus Christ steps in, and he's able to heal the guy. But you think about, there's two examples of some people having some type of sin problem that turned into a physical infirmity, a sin problem. Now, I have an old friend named Randy. He's actually living at Wellsprings right now, and this man started off smoking cigarettes, then started off smoking marijuana, then probably snorting a couple things or smoking different things, and that all graduated up into a needle being placed into his arm. Now, as a result of that, this man conducted something called multiple sclerosis, which Mary Chris was saying is kind of a blanket term, but it's pretty much where his body is now attacking itself. And yeah, all because why? Because of his sins. Because of his sins. Why? Because you know what? He didn't want to stay clean and sober. He didn't want to listen to his mom or stay employed at a good job that he once had. He didn't want any of that. He wanted to do drugs. He wanted to shoot dope into his arm to get that good feeling, to get that high. You know, that, I'm telling you, man, if a Christian just does what they're supposed to do, you will get that high. You want to talk about some adrenaline? Go on any street. You know, I was a lot of adrenaline when we showed up with Saunders at the beer drinking festival. And we're just walking in with our signs, we're like looking around. I'm like, man, this is crazy. I recognize half these people. You know, and we put those signs in the middle, and he just starts preaching. And man, I had family members like coming, not, I guess they're friends of the family, coming up saying, Randy, you better get out of here. They're going to kill you. I mean, man, you know what? I didn't have to shoot dope to do that. I didn't have to smoke anything to get that feeling. You know, I just followed the Lord into there, and God protected me. You know, and well, I was stupid enough. I used to try to think that you needed to get that good feeling in those other ways. But you know, God showed me you just follow Him, and I'm going to meet all your needs. You want to rush? You want to rush? How about standing in the back of a truck, driving around a Walmart parking lot at Christmas time, dressed like Santa? You know, Brother Lentz told me, well, I'm talking like I knew him firsthand in an audio class at my school. He said that they got like a float and they brought it to a Walmart parking lot. You want to talk about getting a rush? And they had one of their buddies dress up like Santa. And they waited until all the kids got, you know, around, and then Santa Claus started preaching hellfire and brimstone. And all the people are running, but you want to talk about getting a rush? Why don't you try to do something for the Lord? You don't got to put a needle in your arm. You don't got to snort something up your nose. You know, and I think the worst part about that lifestyle is the friends that you're going to make. In your mind, they're friends. We understand they're not really. But you know, those connections you feel like you're going to make, or those deep connections you feel like you made with these people, Satan will rob you from those anyway, because you were high or drunk. You won't even remember. And I found that out the hard way with one of my old drug buddies, that he got ran over and he died. And I sat there, you know, they gave me a video. It was like a video of him before he died. He was playing guitar in the garage, which that was our life. That's all we would do. And you know, I just kind of bowed my head in my hands, and I was just like crying. And Mary was like, "What's up?" I was just like, I could barely remember growing up with this guy because we were high every day, and I just felt like the devil was just laughing. Suck I was a sucker. You know, because now I'm trying to comb through my mind, like, man, all those times we had together. I grew up with the guy, and you're trying to remember, you know, what was it that he enjoyed? What was it that, you know, that he liked or something, or how was he about this? And it's like you can't even remember it because the devil robbed you. And that's what he does. He comes to steal, kill, and destroy, right? God told you the whole time. So some people, they suffer to save others. Some people suffer because of their own sins. You think about Miriam. She was struck with leprosy for murmuring against Moses. You think of Elijah's servant, Gehazi. He was struck with leprosy for lying to Naaman and Elisha. These were infirmities, tragedies, illnesses brought in their life because of a sin. Nebuchadnezzar was struck with something called lycanthropy. The Bible says his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers and his nails like bird's claws for the sin of pride. Daniel 4. He was struck with that illness because of his sin. So not all sickness is a result of sin. I'm not saying that. But there are definite circumstances where it is because of sin. So how are you going to know the difference? Ask God. Ask God. Did I bring this upon me, Lord? You know, I guess for the drunk driver sitting in the jail cell, you know, the next morning, I guess he probably doesn't have to do much asking of why he's sitting in the jail cell. You see, why am I here? You gonna blame God? Oh, how dare he allow me to get arrested? No, you're an idiot. So number 3, some people suffer to learn. So you know, I've heard of explanations that the extreme suffering in the dark ages prepared the hearts of those people during that time to have such a great movement of God during the dark ages, which eventually brought the Reformation. But I've heard explanations that without such suffering, such torment, such persecution, those people would have never been ready for the hand of God to come. You know, and that just gets me thinking about the great number of preachers today that say, God can do it again. God can do it again. He'll bring revival to America. And you think of, and they've even went as far as to say that you're a heretic if you don't believe that there will be a great revival before the rapture. You're a heretic if you believe that. So, you know, I just wonder what type of severe persecution these soft-handed preachers experience. And I was actually thinking about it. Like, what type of persecution do these soft-handed preachers really experience? Because, I mean, hey, there's great revival coming. Great revival always comes out of great persecution. So, okay, maybe get in a computer virus. That's pretty bad. It's my whole life's work. It's just gone. You see? I mean, wow, man. Computer virus. That's pretty bad. Or maybe being unfriended on Facebook. How dare he do that? It's because I'm being persecuted. I'm being persecuted. Such persecution. What a joke. You know, and I'll say this probably till the day I die, is if these guys spent 5 minutes on a street corner, they'd see what the fact is. These people, amen, they are without hope and without God in this world, but amen, they don't want Him. They don't want Him. You can cry, you can plead, you can beg. You might find a few gleanings here and there. A person want to get saved every few months or every 6 months or once a year. I don't know. Hey, there's people out there that need to get saved, and that's why we go. But I'm telling you, if these soft-handed preachers that don't get enough sun, if they would just get out in the light and, you know, oh, wow, there's a whole world out here. And even just hold a scripture sign and wave nice and pretty, I mean, they would see the hearts of men. That they're wicked exceedingly. So truly, this suffering is to learn. Because think of this. There's quite a lesson in suffering that going to a Bible institute will never teach you, or some college class you'll never learn that you could learn from going through suffering. So let's look at a few reasons, a few things you'll learn going through suffering. Look at 2 Corinthians 12:7. 2 Corinthians 12:7. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 7. And the first reason would be, well, maybe to teach you humility. Maybe you're going to suffer to learn humility. 2 Corinthians 12:7, it says, "And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan, to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure." So Paul was sick for most of his Christian life. And he also struggled with his eyesight and blindness. Now, I think if you've been around, I kind of hold to the thing that it was more than likely his blindness that was his thorn in the flesh. But Mary Chris was explaining to me, when there's a blind person, a bunch of other things are neglected that would not be neglected if that person were not blind. So, for instance, like, you know, when I'm doing auto glass, we have black glue everywhere. Now, if I didn't have my eyesight, I wouldn't know I have black glue on my hand. I don't feel it. So, you know, I got to itch it on my nose, and I'm like, where's it now? Now it's on my nose. Someone's like, hey, it's on your nose. So I go like this, whereas now I got it on both hands and my nose. And they're like, man, you got it everywhere. So now I'm just like this, and it's all over me, you see? I mean, what about if someone's trying to clean themselves after the bathroom? You're blind. I hope I got it. You know, I mean, if you have hopefully you got a good close family member, you could be like, hey, you know, I didn't get nothing on me, right? You know, but what if you have nobody? You know, you think about like somebody like Mephibosheth, we talked about him. I mean, that guy was having a just elbow around his house. I mean, who knows what he was crawling in. But you see, something like blindness could definitely bring other sicknesses. So I wanted to give you a few verses of why Brother Randy teaches that heresy, that I believe it was blindness. So let me show you. Acts chapter 9, look at verse 3. This is where Saul of Tarsus has a meeting with Jesus Christ. Saul of Tarsus, at this point, you know, he's hailing people into prisons, and he's already helped out with the execution of the first Christian martyr, Stephen. Acts chapter 9 and verse 3, it says, "And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus." Acts chapter 9 and verse 3. "And suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven, and he fell to the earth, and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And he said, Who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what wilt thou have me to do? And the Lord said unto him, Arise, and go into the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do. And then the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. And Saul arose from the earth, and when his eyes were opened, he saw no man, but they led him by the hand, so he was blind, and brought him into Damascus. And he was 3 days without what? Without sight. So this man, he had a meeting with Jesus Christ, and the light was so bright that it literally blinded him. Look at Acts chapter 22. It's another account. He's pretty much giving you like a little biography. Acts chapter 22 and verse 11. Acts 22 and verse 11. It says, And when I could not see for the glory of that light, being led by the hand of them that were with me, I came to Damascus. Why? Because he was blinded from that light. It was something with his eyes. Look at Acts chapter 28 and verse 3. Acts chapter 28 and verse 3. Maybe you never put this one together. This one, I feel, kind of found this last night. When Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire. There came a viper out of the heat and fastened on him. And I was thinking about this. I don't think he saw that snake. I think it was because of his eyes that he even got bit by that snake. Because, I mean, you're going to be digging around in a pile of wood. If you're anybody with some good sight, you're kind of like, you know, really looking around like, okay, all right, this isn't a snake. You know, sometimes snakes look like wood sometimes. They look like a twig or something. Now look at Galatians 4:15. Galatians chapter 4 and verse 15. Galatians 4:15. Yes. Where is then the blessedness ye spake of? For I bear you record that if it had been possible, ye would have plucked out your own eyes and have given them to me. Why? Because he's having problems with his eyes. Now, as Ruckman was getting much older, I got to see him do a chalk talk, but I caught a glimpse of his notes. And man, there are some big letters. There are big letters on that. And you know what? Paul was writing some big letters too. Look at Galatians chapter 6, verse 11. Galatians chapter 6 and verse 11. Verse 11, it says, Ye see how large a letter I've written unto you with mine own hand. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Galatians is only 6 chapters. That's not very big, you know, compared to some of the other books he wrote. So could he possibly be talking about the length of that letter? I don't think so. I think he's talking about, you know what? A lot of times I'll have someone else write for me, but this one was so serious. You see, I wrote it myself. You see how the letters are so big? I had to write it myself. You see? So I personally teach that that thorn in the flesh was his blindness. And you know what? After you meet Jesus, you'll never be the same either. You know, Jacob wrestled with God, and he never walked the same, did he? And you know, Moses, he had a meeting with God in that burning bush, and all the way to the end of his ministry, all he's talking about is that burning bush. He was never the same. You have a meeting with God, it's pretty likely you'll never be the same. That's good. So through suffering the bad eyesight, Paul learned humility. Now think about, for some big Bible scholar, maybe like Paul Chappell or someone like that, think about if he's like, hey, could you help me walk down the hallway? Can you show me where the bathroom is because I can't see? You see what I'm saying? Like somebody that literally, I mean, multitude, I mean, half the country thinks that guy is like it. I don't know him personally. I wouldn't think that he thinks he's all that. I would hope not. But I mean, I would see how hard it would be to probably ignore feeling like that when everyone's calling you up like, oh, we want my son to go to West Coast. And you know, you guys have such good program. And man, after all, you're Paul Chappell. You're the cat's meow. I mean, you are it. I mean, how hard it would probably be for somebody to like that to be, maybe I am all that in a bag of chips. But think about somebody like that who literally, Paul the Apostle, could have felt like that. He was taught by Jesus Christ himself. I mean, I didn't need Peter. I didn't need any of these other disciples. I was taught by Jesus himself. I don't need you, buddy. But for somebody like that, you know, lest he should be exalted above measure to be struck with that blindness. And John Mark, bring John Mark with you. You see? You know, I know I kind of was rough on him back there, but, you know, I've been thinking a lot. Can you bring him with you? You see, he learned humility through what? Through blindness. Through those eyes being challenged. So, also, suffering will teach you patience. Look at Romans 5:3. Romans chapter 5 and verse 3. Romans chapter 5 and verse 3. And it says, "And not only so, but we glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation worketh patience." Now, I'm kind of new to this having kids stuff. But before we had Josiah, I had a pretty wound up tight buddy that, you know, when we were both not married, we'd stay up till 3 a.m. every time we hung out, and, you know. But now that this guy has kids, he's really mellowed out. Why? Because tribulation worketh patience. Amen. You know, but to learn patience is to learn God. And I know you guys know the joke, oh, you never ask the Lord for patience, never pray for patience. But think about this, if you never get patience, look at Romans 15 verse 5. Look at who you'll never know very well. Romans chapter 15 and verse 5. Now the God of what? Patience. So if I never get patience in my life, how well do you think you'll know the God of patience? You're not going to know Him very well. Also, suffering will help you learn to comfort others. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 1. 2 Corinthians chapter 1. Second Corinthians chapter 1. And look at verse 3. 2 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 3. And it says, "Blessed be God, even the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies, and the God of all comfort, who comforteth us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble, by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God." You know, I've had brethren come to me and like, "Oh man, I got this problem," and they're younger, you know. You're like, yeah, I got this problem, man. It's the end of the world, you know. And you're like, I don't think it is. No, but man, this is like the worst thing that ever happened to me. And I'm like, yeah, well, right now, you know what I mean. I joke with my buddy, but I say, well, cheer up, it'll get worse. You know? But the fact is, it does. It gets worse. And what you think is so bad when you're 13 years old, you know, is different than when you're 23, is different than when you're 63. You know, what is bad, as you're getting more knowledge and growing in all these things, I mean, you really want to know what's bad? I mean, as you get older, you'll figure out more and more what really is bad. It's not just being grounded on a Friday night. You know, I mean, to me, when I was growing up, that was the end of the world. I can't even go out. It's Friday. I'm stuck at home. And my dad took my guitar. You know, that was it. It's, you know. So anyway, but the lessons of suffering teach men to take notice of what never mattered to them before. Now, I saw this commercial, and it's these old people that, it's supposed to replicate people that just had heart attacks. It's like for some heart attack medication. But you know what these old people, they're walking out, and that, man, they're opening up those blinds, and you know, they're looking. Oh, it's a beautiful day. You know, and why? Why? Because they just had a brush with death. Amen. They had a heart attack, and they're still alive. So guess what? Now they're going to take time to smell the roses. Maybe now they're going to take time to tell their kid, "I love you," or vice versa. If it happens to the kid, tell the parents, "I love you." You know, whenever you have tragedy, you know, you start thinking about stuff like that. You know, so this suffering, it might be for you to actually comfort other people. You to comfort other people. And it's unfortunate, but people don't often get to the point without suffering without going through some things that you got to realize that other people matter in your life. And when you're just in the nitty-gritty, you're not thinking about other people. You're just, I got to do this. I got to do this. And all I'm thinking about is me and what I'm doing and how my day is going. And God will pop your tire. And you're stuck somewhere where you need help. And then you got to ask somebody, hey, you mind helping me? You see? You might be put through that suffering to learn something. What is God trying to show you? What does He want you to learn out of this? If it's not to save others, and it's not because you're in some sin, maybe it's to learn something. Maybe God wants you to learn. And then lastly, some people suffer for serving the Lord. Some people suffer for serving the Lord. Look at 1 Peter 2:19. I'll have you guys out of here before 5 p.m., I promise. 1 Peter chapter 2. And look at verse 19. So, some people suffer for serving the Lord, but I want to point out with this verse, it matters how you go through the suffering. You can suffer for the Lord, but if you don't go through your suffering well, you're not going to have any rewards in heaven. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 19, it says, "For this is thankworthy, if a man for conscience toward God endure grief, suffering wrongfully. For what glory is it, if when you be buffeted for your faults, ye shall take it patiently? But if, when you do well and suffer for it, ye take it patiently, this is acceptable to God. For even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example, that ye should follow in His steps." And it gives you a list. "Who did no sin, neither was guile found in His mouth." See, once we start suffering, raggle-fraggle, "who, when he was reviled, reviled not again." Some guy runs you off the road. "I'll get you!" Or you pull over, you're trying to wave him over. Come on. "When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to Him that judgeth righteously." So it matters how you go through that suffering. Look also at Philippians chapter 3. Philippians chapter 3. Philippians chapter 3 and verse 10. And it says, "That I may know Him and the power of His resurrection and the fellowship of His" what? Sufferings. Being made conformable unto death. So, you know what? When you're going through those sufferings, you are going to understand God a little bit better. You're going to understand Jesus Christ a little bit better. And you know what? He's going to understand you a little bit better because you handled it well. And that fellowship with God's going to get much closer because you're handling it well. God knows how hard it is to handle the suffering. He reviled not. You know, so it matters how you go through that suffering, because if you're suffering for righteousness' sake, like the Bible says here, you're suffering because you're serving the Lord. So it matters how you go through. So that begs the topic, maybe we need to rethink suffering. Look at 1 Peter chapter 4. 1 Peter chapter 4. Look at verse 12. 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 12. Rethink suffering. "Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you." That sounds like a promise. "As though some strange thing happened unto you." He's like, don't think, hey man, it's coming your way. I'm telling you. Don't think it's strange when it comes. "But rejoice inasmuch as ye are partakers of" what? Christ's sufferings. I mean, does that mean you had the crown of thorns put on your head? No. The nails put in your hands and feet? No. But the sufferings you're going through, you're going to be able to be partaker with Christ's sufferings. you're going to understand Him better. If you're suffering for righteousness' sake. Now, if your wife is just mad at you because you're cursed at her all the time, you see what I'm saying? You think you're going to have some reward in heaven for that? Oh, I'm suffering for Christ, for the righteousness of Christ. I'm sorry, man. You're suffering because you're a loudmouth and you're stupid. It says that when His glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with this exceeding joy if ye be reproached for the name of Christ. See, that's different than just shooting your mouth off. Happy are ye, for the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. On their part He is evil spoken of, but on your part He's glorified. Why? Because you took some time to figure out how you're going to go through that suffering. You went through it well. But let none of you suffer as a murderer, or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody in other men's matters. Yet if any man suffer as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God on this behalf. You know, you think about the apostles leaving rejoicing after they were just beat. Praise the Lord, brother! We did it! You know? Oh, God got us through. We're alive still. This is great. We're going to go preach. We're preaching tonight. They're like, you're still bleeding. Amen! Wrap it up. I got to go. I mean, they're literally rejoicing because of that suffering and hardship. So suffering is never an easy subject to understand, and I'm not trying to act like I understand it all. I haven't went through half of the stuff you guys have probably went through. But we're reminded that in the Bible, it shows you pretty much what you go through. You're going to have to come to a point where you trust God. God, I don't know why I have this in my life. Show me to trust you. You know, the Bible says without faith it's impossible to please God. And God is going to keep something in your life that is going to make it necessary for you to still have faith. You know, you might go to Bible Institute, you might do the one-year institute here. I mean, man, you might think that you really know most of the hard things in the Bible, you know it. But you know what the fact is? God's going to put something in your life to humble you. He's going to put something in your life that you still need Him. He's going to put something in your life that you still need faith. You know, and you're like, oh man, you might be some theological genius, but you know what? You still need faith to please God. And there's going to have to be an element of faith needed to keep focus while trying to please God in the midst of your infirmity. Because you're going to go through something, and your faith will be tested. And let's close with this verse, actually. 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 10. And it says this, but the God of grace, who hath called us unto His eternal glory by Jesus Christ, after that ye have suffered a while, make you perfect, establish, strengthen, settle you. To Him be glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. All right, you guys may stand, and I just want to have a few moments for altar call. We talked about last week. I just kind of feel like the Lord was impressing me to just have a time at the end of service. If you stand, it makes it easier if anyone wants to come out for altar call.